Jimmy Smith will tell you it's time for Bay Area baseball, past, present, and future. I am back, and this is Bay Area baseball, past, present, and future. My name is Zig Tyko, and my co-host is Tim Haller. How are you, Timmy?
Doing good, Ralph. How's everything going?
Oh, what a beautiful day it is in California. A beautiful afternoon it was, the day before Valentine's Day, and I spent it in Berkeley, walking around, seeing the little kiosks out there, and had a nice Indian lunch, and looking to talk a little baseball with my buddy. Isn't this cool that we get to do this?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I'm looking forward to this evening's show.
All right. Last week we talked a lot about your youth spent on in the clubhouse of the San Francisco Giants, and what we just kind of touched on was that your dad, the general manager of the Giants and former general manager and player on the 1962 Giant team, and 6 or 7 years after that, solid National League catcher, was traded to the Dodgers. And we touched on one of the most controversial subjects in Giant history, and that was the day in 1965 when Juan Marichal, who was brushed back from behind on a pitch by Johnny Roseboro, throwing the ball back to the pitcher. Terrific feud going on between the Giants, which had only been going on for about 45 years before that. And tell us what happened that day from your memory, and tell us how those two players, after a horrible instance, became friends later in life.
Well, I was I was still maybe 2 years old, 3 years old, so everything that I've gotten has been handed down to me through time. But, you know, I know that season particularly, there was a lot of activity going on with pitchers and hitters. Drysdale was known, of course, to brush back his guys, and Koufax also, and as a matter of fact, in that particular game, Koufax was pitching for the Dodgers. And, you know, they had been going after it, yelling at each other, bantering and everything. And it just so happened that when Marichal came up to hit in that inning, Roseboro threw the ball sort of behind the back of the head of Marichal and it actually flicked his ear. And Marichal responded.
I didn't know if it actually hit his ear. I know he definitely heard the sound of it go by him, and wow.
And as I've watched footage of that brawl, Dad wasn't even playing that day. He was down in the bullpen, and but you know, everything was a melee. It was just crazy nuts after Marichal went after Roseboro with that bat. And Tito Fuentes was also quite involved in it, and he was wielding his lumber as well. But you know, it was just a sad day, I think, in generally overall in baseball. But it was something that led to the deep and sincere friendship between Roseboro and Marichal later on. And it was just an amazing thing, what transpired and then what it turned into.
Right. They ironically became teammates with the Dodgers. And Roseboro accepted his apology, and actually Juan spoke at his funeral, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know if they were bosom buddies, but they were close enough, at least on the outside, that they put a horrible instance in Giant Dodger in baseball and life. I mean, it was just. And I still have pictures of Willie cradling Roseboro's bleeding head in his arms. And yes, Fuentes coming out there wearing not number 23, but number 26, if I remember correctly, before he was given number 23. And yeah, it was a bad day. Tito was a character, wasn't he?
He was, but still a man of integrity too. I think Tito was, as we all know, we like to characterize Latin players as being a little bit flashier, I guess. And that was their, that's their nature. It's incumbent with them, and that's just something that's part of their game, if you will.
Right.
But Tito is just a wonderful person. He's a great guy, and of course now a longtime broadcaster with the Giants on their Spanish channel.
Absolutely, and he was instrumental in the year of the Fox in 1971 when he was playing second base, and Chris Spire was a rookie, and Charlie Fox put him in and said to Horace Stoneham, it may cost me my job, but these guys are the best double play combination, and we'll win with these guys. And they did, and that was quite.
Yeah, it was a good club.
Yeah, it had Kingman coming up. He was a rookie. They had Bonds in right, Mays in center. His last really great year, really terrific year, I think, was in '71. And they were it not for Pittsburgh, they would have won that pennant, but were it not for wheels, my grandmother would be a bicycle. But in any event, we look back sometimes with regret, because that was it took a long time for the Giants to come back and make playoff status after '71 between times. What's your first memory of being at a ballpark?
The first memory I have that it comes to mind is back before they built that shell at Candlestick, where they wrapped the stands all the way around. It was a very cold and windy day, and I was with my mother. I couldn't have been, 3 years old that I recall, maybe 2. And down the right field line and up towards the back of the grandstand, there was this tower, this high sort of whatever architectural thing that was built up, and it looked kind of like a little miniature lighthouse or something. I'm not even sure what it was, the purpose of it was, but it was down the right field line, back in the back of the grandstand. And I remember the game was just getting over, and it was a packed house. It was a Sunday game. And my mother taking me down that right field stretch of stands to go to the clubhouse, or waiting area for the players' clubhouse.
Right.
And that's my first real memory, and it was more so, not so much about the game or the baseball, but it was the stadium and the wind and the noise and all the people. And just sort of that chaos that happens at game end, people rushing to their cars to get out.
And you're meeting up with your dad, and it wouldn't matter if you were a train engineer or an airline pilot or a baseball player. You're just, you're there. Here comes Dad. That had to be.
Yeah, I'm just like, hey, I get to go see my dad. You're exactly right. I could care less what he did for a living.
That point, absolutely. Give us some insight what it's like. Everybody says, well, how great it must be. The father of the family is a Major League Baseball player and makes pretty good bucks no matter whatever era you're in. You always make a little bit more Now it's become craziness, but he was a little bit more than the average guy, and this, that, and the other thing. That notwithstanding, the glamour and the glitz. My dad's a player. The wife says my husband is in the World Series. All this shit. But you know what? You're a family, and he's gone half the year, half the baseball year. He's on the road. When he's home, he's pressured. He's tired and stuff. What's it like for a family to cope with it? It can't be all just glitz and glamour. What was it like for your mom to have to take over for weeks at a time? A spring training sometimes. I'll bet you all didn't go down every year. What's it like?
Yeah, for Mom, she sacrificed, absolutely. She put everything aside for the well-being of our family. And, I really can't describe or put into words very well just exactly what she is, but she was the foundation of the home. Not that Dad's presence when he was there, obviously things were different when he was home, but, Mom was the glue that held us together. She disciplined us. She did everything, made sure that we got not outside of whatever our normal activities were, but if we had practice or we had other activities or extracurriculars going on, she was always there no matter what, and there was always a warm meal on the table. We didn't go without. My brother and I, we really, we didn't, we were very privileged. We were very fortunate and blessed. But my mom was the whole structure of the whole everything. She held us together.
Very cool. The weeks that he was gone, you said things were different when he comes back. It's almost like Dad's home. You got to behave more, or what's that about?
Yeah, it's just his presence, knowing he's there. I have to say that when Dad was playing, he wasn't really vocal. He didn't talk a lot. He didn't seem to share a lot as he did once he retired. And maybe a lot of that was just because I was so young, and I don't recall it. But just his presence, I felt safe. And here was this guy who was just massively huge. And I wasn't a very big kid, but when I remember at that age, having the opportunity to, when I hugged my dad and he was standing up, I was hugging him around one of his legs. That's right. How tall and imposing he was. But, Dad.
And you were 26 years old, which is another thing.
Yeah, right. So, but, I just remember at that, during those early years of my life, his presence and when he did speak, everybody sort of perked up, There was some wisdom coming out of his mouth, and we better pay attention. But he was kind of reserved a little bit, I guess you would say, and I think he was a lot like that when he played. He was a leader on those ball clubs, but he led by example, and what he did was he went out and played every day, played hard, and catching as many ball games as he did. That was his statement. That's how he communicated, was just through his actions, really, more than anything. Obviously, as he got older and became more instrumental in the development of minor leaguers, and then ultimately the general manager, he was quite an articulate guy, very well educated. He was very well spoken, but as a kid, I just remember this huge presence, and I was safe when he was there, and it was just comforting for me.
Were your dad and his brother, who is a Major League umpire, your uncle, Bill Haller, were they close? Were your families close? Do you have cousins? Is that a big part of your life?
It still is. It really is. I am still very close to my Uncle Bill, and he's getting up in age now. But our family, at least on the Haller side, has remained very close. My Aunt Joyce lives back in Illinois, as my uncle does. We were, sort of just a normal family, but we just appreciated each other's company when we had the opportunity to be together. My dad and my brother were very close, obviously. There was 2 years separating them in age. But Uncle Bill, too, was quite an athlete growing up and everything. And they were highly competitive with each other. They fought a lot. They gave my grandparents fits. But, it's just it was a very, pretty solid family. We put the fun as a dysfunctional, I guess I could say, but great people, awesome people. Uncle Bill's doing pretty good even at this age, and he's slowing down a little bit, but we still speak on a weekly basis.
Hey, I hope you can get him to be a guest on the podcast.
I think I could probably. I know a few people. I probably could get them on.
Right, you have what they call juice. Not to be confused with Jews, which I have. So you have Jews, I have Jews. I don't know. We got different families.
Oy vey, oy vey.
Oy vey, right. What was life like for you guys? I'm not being spiritually. What was your early spiritual stuff? I'm just curious how you were raised in a Western family. Is there anything that indicative to the Midwest or what'd you get? I'm curious, just to get to.
It was a smorgasbord of things, mostly Christian stuff. It was my grandmother, my dad's mom was Methodist. My grandfather was Catholic. They were a mess, and I just think, they all loved God, but they did it their own way. There was nothing disciplined about it. They treated people with respect. They tried to live respectable lives. I think, but it wasn't until my dad was coaching, and I think at the time he was the bullpen coach, and so we're talking about I'm saying like 76, somewhere in there. Dad got involved in sort of like what they called, I can't even recall the actual name of it, but there was a sort of a group of guys, Gary Lavelle, Johnny LeMaster, Jack Clark. They had
the God Squad.
Yeah, Rob Andrews. Yeah, they had a clubhouse Bible studies and Sunday morning chapels before day games on Sundays. And Dad got involved in that, and I think that was about the time that I recall in my life something profound changed with my father. I mean, he always, before that, like I said, before when he was playing and everything, was reserved. People respected him. But when he got involved with these guys and started doing some of these things that were Christian-related, I guess, if you will, he changed. He really developed a relationship with God, of the God that he understood, and it was a transformation for my father, and ultimately
did that help lead you to your path, which is spiritual?
Yeah, in a way, I think it's just the way my dad lived his life more than anything. I know he had his own special relationship with his God, and I admired that about him. I mean, he wasn't one of those people that went out and he didn't thump Bibles at he didn't throw the Bible at you, he didn't quote scripture or anything. He was a guy that would just demonstrate his heart, his love for people. He didn't go around doing any of that fanaticism kind of thing. He was just a very quiet leader in that regard. He loved God, but he didn't push God down anybody's throat. He just behaved in a manner that was kind of godly, really, actually, and that inspired me. For whatever reasons, from the time I was just a little guy to when I can barely remember anything, and still to this day, my father was always somebody that, the only real person that I looked to for that sort of, just the way he held himself and conducted himself and spoke to people and treated people. He never spoke badly about people behind their back. He never had a bad word to say about anybody. He never got into confrontation. Well, I shouldn't say never, but he was probably the most kind and loving person I've ever met, and he just happened to be my father. And I like that about him. I like those qualities in a person because they're attractive to me. And I want to be like my dad. And it doesn't mean that I wanted to be, I did want to be a good ball player too, but I wanted to be the type of person, the type of man my father was, where he was liked and he was respected.
Incidentally, you didn't make the major leagues, but you were a good ball player. You were a professional ball player with a shot at making the major leagues, and if it weren't for your injury, there's no doubt that you would have. So you're a world-class athlete. Don't ever shortchange that. You know how few who ever played Little League make it to their high school team, let alone to be drafted and play minor league baseball, which is professional. And don't lose sight of that. That's a pretty good accomplishment in itself.
Well, it was a great experience, and I'm very grateful and fortunate for that time in my life. I certainly loved it. There's no doubt about it. But we touched on this last week a little bit. It was for me at that time of my life, it was like falling off a cliff. But also at the same time, I think it probably was one of the best things that could have happened to me as a person, even though it was hard and traumatic. It's allowed me to sort of transform into the person that I've always kind of wanted to be. And I believe that we have, things happen for a reason. And I think that was just part of my life to put me in the direction to where I am, ultimately now where I am today. Do I wish it never happened? Absolutely. Sure, I would have loved to have had 10 or 12 years in the major leagues, but that wasn't in the cards, and it's okay that it didn't happen.
Okay, Timmy, let me ask you this. When the accident happened and it was clear that you weren't going to play again, and you were in the Detroit organization, if I'm correct.
The Chicago White Sox, right?
The White Sox. I'm sorry. And did they offer you some sort of minor league coaching, administration, transfer in, something to, given the fact that you were injured on their time, as it were, on their clock? Did they take care of you in that respect? I'm just curious.
Well, it's my understanding, and I don't know. This is all really hearsay, but during the winter meetings after that season, and my uncle was working he was one of the scouts. He was a minor league scout for the White Sox. I guess they all gather around. There's a lot of talking and communication amongst all the personnel. And I personally know that there were several guys communicating about me possibly coaching or working somewhere in the minor league system. But I also know, and I'm not absolutely sure who it or they were or who it was, said something to the effect that, well, he's too young. He's going to want to think that he can still try to play, and the kid's heartbroken. And if he's 27, 28 years old out there, thinking that he still has it, he's going to be distracted. So there was this sort of different set of views amongst the guys that worked in the front office and such. So they never extended anything to me. And I don't think I would have been prepared anything like that anyway, because I was so self-absorbed and so involved in what happened to Tim and poor Tim that I would have probably just squandered that opportunity. But as time has gone on and my life has changed, I would have loved to have an opportunity to work in baseball. There are a lot of guys that I know involved in the game, and they're saying
because you've developed the communication skills, you've developed the teaching ability, and you can't take the baseball knowledge away from you. There still may be an opportunity down the road where you could take advantage of something that you might not have been equipped to take advantage of back then, but now you've got other tools that you can bring to the table.
Well, if that ever happens, that would be an awesome opportunity, I think. But a lot of years have gone by, too, and the game has changed. I'm the type of person, I'm old school. The eye test is what works for me, and what is inside of a person's chest, his heart. Everything I see nowadays is all about statistics and numbers and all this mathematical, whatever you want to call it. And sure, those are great little things to be able to know about guys and everything. So I don't know how well I would fit into that community today. I really don't. And I enjoyed being just a fan today, and I do. I opine. I tell guys, this guy's got it, this guy doesn't, and sometimes I'm spot on, and sometimes I'm way out in left field with it. But I have guys, friends of mine that talk to me and are in the game, and they say, "Why aren't you working in baseball?" Well, I haven't been too ambitious to reach out and ask for anything, one. And I sort of lay below, I'm like below the radar. I'm not into publicizing or throwing resumes out or anything like that. So, that part of it is on me. If I want to do something, I have to make it known that I'm interested. But I think my life today is good the way it is. Now, if somebody comes along and says, "Hey, you would be good in this position," I would certainly talk to them and see what possibilities there are. But right now, everything's just the way it's supposed to be.
You told me something I didn't know, that obviously after he quit umpiring or retired from umpiring, your uncle was a scout.
Yeah, and that's kind of a unique thing where he spent years in the American League umpiring, and then he got involved with the Yankees for many years. He worked for George Steinbrenner as a scout, and so he was able to look at baseball from so many different angles, and a lot of it, being talent and, observing guys and giving his reports to, the powers that be on certain players. But one of the guys that he was big on was a guy named Jim Tomei. He was involved in he ultimately signed Cleveland. Yeah, and, he's probably, there's a possibility that he's going to be Cooperstown bound. But he scouted for several years, mostly with the Yankees, and then he finished out his career with the White Sox.
Okay. Any Steinbrenner stories, good, bad, or indifferent? And I'm not trying to stir up any dope. I've heard such wonderful things about how magnanimous Steinbrenner can be and how he was terrific with Billy Martin in a lot of ways. I mean, they made each other crazy, but he was always there for him, it seemed.
Yeah, I think George Steinbrenner, everything that I've heard about him, I had the opportunity of shaking his hand on a couple of occasions. I always thought George Steinbrenner was kind of a classy guy. Now, what I heard negatively about him was things that I heard through the press, and how accurate really is that all the time. I know my Uncle Bill loved working for George Steinbrenner. He said he was one of the fairest men he'd ever worked for or with. And I can say that about guys that I played against or with. I mean, Bucky Dent said the same thing. I do remember one thing that happened when I was in my first year of pro ball. We were down in, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, in the Florida State League, and we were playing their single-A club. And their second baseman that night, a particular night we were playing, made 2 errors. on routine ground balls, and Steinbrenner was there. And he actually came down during the game, removed the kid from the game, and released him right then and there. He let that kid go, which is devastating to anybody. Could be devastating to anybody. He ended up signing with another organization, but that was a demonstration of some of the things that I heard and read about George Steinbrenner being a little bit ruthless too. But you know what? My experiences were all positive, and everything that I heard, whether it was from my uncle or other guys that he actually played for him. Randy Velarde was a really good friend of mine. He spent several years of his career with the Yankees. It was all really positive stuff.
And the A's, as a matter of fact, Randy was a very, very good utility infielder, kind of second, third, good ball player.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. Steinbrenner, why do you suppose it is that Steinbrenner gets the mixed reviews? I mean, is he?
Well, I mean, first and foremost,
he was good to your uncle, and others. I've heard stories from others of he was very good with others, but yet with some, was it a question of personality? Was it a question of he had a football type mentality, football coach's mentality that just wasn't right for a 162 game schedule, and there was a lot of time for him to stew? Or what do you suppose that could be? And
well, you know what, I think in my own opinion, George Steinbrenner, bottom line, he wanted to win. And he had, at that time, pretty deep pockets. So he could afford to spend the money on the Ricky Hendersons or even before that, the Catfish Hunters or the Dave Winfields, and bring in these, these really good, and Reggie Jackson for that matter. George wanted to win, and he was willing to go to almost any length to do that. But I think a lot of it was that what we saw and what we heard, we never were privy to what was going on behind the scenes. George was a personality, and he liked things big, and he let you know about it, and we got to see all of that unfurl on television and in the interviews, whatever we read, watched video clips of him. And I think a lot of that could have been just the fact that it was the show. It was part of the show. But I know that he was a very good businessman. I know that people that worked for him were very loyal and worked for him for years. I mean, decades. I think of guys like Gene Michaels, who was there for most of his career as an executive. Not all of it. He spent some time in Seattle as well, I think, and even Cincinnati. But guys like that, there's something about that we didn't really get to see about George Steinbrenner and the way he conducted his business, where these guys would love to work for him. And there's got to be something to be said about that, And when it comes to a guy like Billy Martin, for example, he was probably very similar to George Steinbrenner in terms of just attitude. I'm going to win no matter what. And those two would clash because it was a power struggle. It was a mental wrestling match between the two. But they both wanted the same thing.
They both sometimes speak first and think later, and that, and then have to back up the position and this, that, and the other thing. I admired both. I had a Billy Martin glove when I was a kid growing up. He was scrappy. He was everything that a winner did. He was always alert on the field. I remember I think it was the 52, maybe the 53 World Series, when there was a pop-up and 2 or 3 infielders just lost it, didn't know where it was. Martin comes running in, makes a spectacular catch. And he was Casey's boy. is the legend of Casey Stengel all over baseball, or just an American League thing? Are there people that, is he revered all over baseball as much as he is in the American League?
Oh, I think he's revered on all of baseball, not just the American League. I mean, he had a couple memorable years with the Mets, and
not necessarily winning, but they were
right.
The early years were interesting.
Memorable is you take it as you want. I don't care who was managing that club then, as a new club in the National League. They would have had a hard time. It didn't matter who was in charge, and I think they made the best choice in having Casey Stengel man that club, just because of his notoriety, his wisdom, whatever you want to call it. Casey Stengel is beloved in all of Major League Baseball, or all of American baseball, for that matter.
All right. Hey, this has been a terrific episode, and I just look forward to it all week, and I'm rejuvenated in what I'm doing because you're wonderful. And next week we're going to go into the American League a little bit, and we've talked so much Giants. Let's go across the bay, and we'll talk some A's ball. And what I'd also like to do on our episodes is talk a little bit current and future A's and Giants. See who's coming up, see who you like in the farm system, see what you enjoy on today's team. And I want to do an episode real soon on who are the best fantasy guys, good bang for your buck on both the A's and the Giants. A lot of people are into fantasy ball. Who do you think is worth more than they're being advertised as or being touted as? Who are the upcomers? So give us something to talk about on future shows. And like I say, Timmy, it's fun for me. I'm just going to end the episode by telling everybody to just keep on keeping on. Life gets tough sometimes. And, taking it one day at a time and putting one foot in front of the other, you'll find that if you put everything into perspective, things will look better tomorrow. And thanks for being here. We'll be doing it again next week, same time, same place.
All right, buddy. Take good care.
Thank you, and I hope you're continuing to have fun with it.
All right. Bye-bye now.
See ya.